It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Now, I do need to come clean in the podcast and let you know that even though...
You're a dirtbag?
Oh, I am going to share a couple of dumb stories about my teenage years. I was the teenage boy that you really hoped that you wouldn't have.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
So we don't normally start our Happy Families podcast with a sing-along, but I've got a feeling...
I'm just a teenage dirtbag, baby.
This is Teenage Dirtbag by Wheatus, and I don't know if we're allowed to play it or not, but guess what?
We just did.
We just did. And tonight on the, I was going to say on the Happy Families podcast, this is the Happy Families podcast. Tonight, as a freebie, a free webinar, because our Happy Families members do so much to support the work that we're doing a free webinar about raising, I don't want to offend anyone. I don't want you to think that you have to have a teenage dirtbag kid to come to the webinar. If you're raising teens and every now and again you think, oh my goodness, what am I doing here? It's a bit of a flashback to the 90s as well, because I was a teenager through the late 80s, early 90s, and we're flashing back. So it's going to be so much fun. If you have not been on our Facebook page or been getting our newsletters, this is your last chance to get on board with this thing. All the details are on our Facebook page or at happyfamilies.com.au. Teenage Dirtbag, free webinar. Tonight, going back to the 90s.
Man, it's the 90s. It's hammer time. Come on.
We've got to tap into our own empathy about what we were like when we were teenagers so that we can remember how we're supposed to, what we wanted so that we can be that for our teenagers, because they need us to be awesome, because being a teenager is confusing. It's hard. I love the way you belted that out, by the way. That was power. I felt like I needed to adjust your levels and pull them right back. I hope that we didn't distort anyone's speakers.
Well, with teenagers, there is so much to talk about.
Oh, yeah, I know.
You could delve into emotions, learning to drive, friends, time management, alcohol, letting go, learning to let go, sex, education, discipline. What do they do after school? Like, where are we going with this?
Just their ability to organise themselves. Like, seriously. So in tonight's webinar, it's a short one. It's about 30 minutes. And we could talk about all that sort of stuff. I'm just going to pick on 3 things in the webinar tonight. I'll be talking about attitudes and emotions, because you know how they have such big attitudes and they also have such big emotions. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about motivation, like how do you actually help your kids to have some level of motivation, especially for the stuff that you know is important that they don't think is important. I'm thinking of school. And the dumb things. We're going to talk about that as well, because the reality is that there is a group of teenagers who love to engage in risky behaviour. They do dumb things, not always super risky. Like the time when I tried to drink 4 litres of milk in an hour with a bunch of my friends. That was a dumb thing. That was a risky behaviour.
So I didn't see
well.
a reel the other day.
A reel?
Where a teenage girl, it was a girl.
Yeah.
You know how you're supposed to be able to put like a Mentos into a bottle of Coke?
Oh, yeah, and apparently
it
it goes all
explodes?
fizzy or something, yeah.
Well, she dropped it in and then put it in her mouth, and it literally came out her nose.
Oh, that's terrible.
It was insane. And I'm legit, the whole time I'm thinking, why?
Oh, I was about to say, do you want to do that this weekend? But I guess you don't. That'd be a fun date. We could do that for date night.
Oh, my goodness.
Take photos, video it.
Why do our teenagers' brains take them there?
One major reason, reward. The promise of reward overrides any risks that are in the environment. Our teenagers, many of them, are so wired for reward that they just have to do that thing because of the promise of how good it's going to be. They're going to be socially accepted. They're going to look like the big man or the awesome girl. They're going to...
The awesome girl with foam literally coming out her nostrils.
Do you know how much cultural cachet you get from that? The social capital that comes from that. I mean, it's massive. And this is why boys jump off the roof into the pool, for example, because everyone's like, no way, you're so brave, you're so masculine.
You did that.
That's right. So they get the reward. And here's the interesting thing. They're capable of identifying the risk. If you were to sit down with them in the cold light of day and say, hey, look at how high the roof is, look at where the pool is, tell me, what are the chances? How likely is it? How smart is it? They can tell you all the reasons why. It's the same.
But they also think they're invincible. It's never going to happen to them.
That's part of it, but not exactly. In the cold light of day, they will recognise that there could be risks and they will acknowledge. But there's so much wrapped up in saying no. Once those emotions are hot. The perfect example of this is the morning that I was driving out to Terrigal Point because there was a 5 to 6 metre swell. So I'm growing up on the New South Wales Central Coast. I'm a mad keen surfer. I've got my driver's license. All of the boys and I, we'd been watching the swell charts. We knew the surf was going to be huge. And we teed it up. Everyone stayed at my house that night because I was the closest to the beach. I was only about a 10-minute drive to the beach. And that morning we were up at first light, in fact, before first light, driving to the beach. And as we came around the roundabout on the corner of Ocean View Drive and Terrigal Drive, you can see across Terrigal Lagoon to the Skillion, to Terrigal Point, the Haven. And I just saw this enormous... I was in the front car. I was driving the front car with two mates, and in the car behind we had another three of us, surfboards on the roof. Saw this wave come through. It's about a kilometre and a half away from where we are to where the waves are breaking. And it was, without question, the biggest wave I had ever seen in my life to that date live in person. And I thought in my heart, I'm going to die today.
But you still went out, didn't you?
Well, before we even talked about going out, as soon as I saw that wave and had that feeling in my heart that today was the day I drowned, I wound down the window and I went, woohoo! And I had my fist pumping out the window and I'm screaming in the car, and the two guys next to me are also going, woohoo! This is going to be awesome. And we drove up the hill and through Terrigal and around the corner to the Haven, and we got out of the car. And I was waiting for one of the six of us to say, guys, it's actually really big. Why don't we just watch today? But as if anyone was going to say that. Because the reward, the promise of what it looks like if you can say, I was at Terrigal Point that day, it's just too great. We didn't back out. And the research actually shows that when your friends are involved in it, you're even more likely to keep on pushing ahead in spite of everything in your body that is saying, no, don't do it. Now, if I sat down and had a conversation with you or with my dad and we were looking at the surf, I would have come to the conclusion pretty quickly, this is a bad idea. This is a day where people who are inexperienced and young and not that strong, this is one of those days where they could very well drown. But there was the momentum. And how do you say no when five of your mates are all in?
Are you going to actually share with parents how they get their kids to get to a point where they can say no?
Yeah, I'm going to do my very best, certainly. That's the intention, because we want our kids to not take those risks.
Like there's this notion of being courageous.
Yes.
Like if this is a stupid thing to do, stand up. Don't go down that road.
It's really tricky. We've also got to take into account things like what it is to be masculine, what it is to be feminine, what society expects of us. I mean, you can say the same thing about war, and yet there is something about it where whether you like it or not, there are some people who are drawn into those kinds of situations because of what they get to say about themselves and what others get to say about them because of their courage. And how grateful are we that there are people who have been so courageous over the years and have given so much for us to live in the country and to live the lives that we live today. Anyway, that's a tangent. What matters most is that we're going to talk about kids and their motivation. We're going to talk about kids and their not so healthy choices, and we're going to talk about kids and the big emotions that they have. Our teenagers, what's going on? Teenage Dirtbag. It's all happening tonight, and it's free. Now, I do need to come clean in the podcast and let you know that even though
you're a dirtbag.
Oh, I am going to share a couple of dumb stories about my teenage years. I was the teenage boy that you really hoped that you wouldn't have, but we're doing it as a free webinar because I want everyone to know about it. We've got a teenage kid summit coming up. The summit is called the Smells Like Teen Spirit Summit. Remember Nirvana? Smells Like Teen Spirit. 90s flashback again. And in a couple of weeks' time, we're doing, I think, one of the most in fact, I don't think I know, the most incredible Happy Family Summit that we have ever done. It may be our last one. The Smells Like Teen Spirit Summit. Have a listen to who we've got. We've got the incredible Julie Lithcott-Hames. She's that Stanford admissions officer who wrote the New York Times bestseller, How to Raise an Adult. She's going to be joining us. Incredible speaker and so much fabulous knowledge. We're going to be talking to literally the world's most expert adolescent researcher. There is nobody on the planet who has a higher reputation than Professor Lawrence Steinberg. If you have a look behind you on the bookshelf there, you can see the green book laying on top. Lawrence Steinberg, Adolescence. That is literally the book. That is the textbook.
I was about to say, it looks like a textbook. It looks heavy duty.
He has literally written the world's best textbook for university on adolescence. Lawrence Steinberg's going to be joining us talking all about...
how do you do this? How do you find these people and actually convince them to talk to you?
Do you know how I do it? I reach out to people who care so much about what they write about and talk about, and I give them an opportunity to talk to me about it, because this is what I live for, and this is what they live for. And when you meet somebody who just wants to talk to you about that thing that matters so much, you say yes. And they're incredible people. So we've got Julie Lithcott-Hames. We've got Professor Lawrence Steinberg. I've got Dr. Bettina Honan. She wrote a book called Understanding the Teenage Brain. And we're going to talk specifically with her about the complications related with neurodiversity in teenagers, so ADHD and autism in particular. We're going to be speaking with Professor Jean Twangy. She's the one who wrote the book iGen. She was the one who wrote that article called Have Smartphones Destroyed a Generation? She's one of the world's leaders when it comes to what is going on with teens and social media. Leonard Sachs, he wrote a book called Boys Adrift. So he's going to talk about the decline of boys and young men and what we can do to help our boys. Oh, Rebecca Sparrow, talking about teen friendships. Oh, we're going to be speaking with Josh Shipp. He's the #1 youth speaker in the United States. We've also got Karen Young.
She's great.
From Hey Sigmund, talking all about helping your teen with anxiety. Amy Morin, 13 Things Strong Kids Do. She's written a whole lot of books all about that. Like, this lineup, I hope I haven't forgotten anyone. I probably have, but this lineup is phenomenal. World class. Absolutely the very best that you can get. And they're joining me for the Smells Like Teen Spirit Summit. I'm not going to talk any more about that now. That happens at the end of the webinar tonight, the free webinar, Teenage Dirtbag. Even if you don't want to come to the summit, come to the free webinar. It's going to be so great. 30, 40 minutes of high quality content about what we can do to help our teens to thrive and flourish. 8 p.m. this evening. All the details on our Facebook page at happyfamilies.com.au.
Well, I'm just putting it out there. You're not having dinner until you come home. That way I can ensure that you'll only be 30 minutes.
Oh, thank you so much. There's no way I'm only going to be 30 minutes. It's a free webinar. It's supposed to be 30. You can bet your boots it's going to be longer. That's all I'm saying.
Your dinner might be cold.
Okay, it might be. The Happy Families podcast, by the way, is produced by Justin Rowan from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. And tonight, please join me, 8 p.m, free webinar, 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, that is, Teenage Dirtbag. If you can't make it, we will provide you with a link to watch a replay. But this is one you want to be at, because I'm going to be answering questions. It's just going to be such a great webinar. Can't wait to see you there.